We've brought out our binoculars, brushed the snow off the lawn furniture just so we could stare at each other. Because this is Spaced Out Sunday. You know, every time I do that intro, I have to fight the urge to just break into Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Is that dating myself? Was it just a Midwestern thing? Should we pour dirt all over the studio floor and bring in some monster trucks? You think Dave would notice tomorrow? He probably would. Anyway, I'm your host, Everett Themer, and we are happy to welcome you, along with Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio, to tonight's broadcast. If you happen to miss any of tonight's show, you can listen to it for free in our archives at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including keeping up to date on all the weird news, as well as Florida Man's latest exploits at Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire, finding a book to read in our We Read the Night section, and joining the Space Travelers Club, where for $5 a month, you can join our ongoing live chat, tell us what you really think in one of our forums, and check out some exclusive content. Yeah, you know, like what our own Florida man, Kelly Iyer, has to say on the Iyer Perspective. You've got to join the club to hear that, though, because we don't want to be responsible for letting another Florida man run loose. And, of course, tonight's show is brought to you by the fine people at Chive Charities. Please head on over to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, chivecharities.org, as we work to make the world 10% better. Now, tonight, we are fortunate to have two guests return to join us. They've both been on alone, but we all had so much fun that we decided it would be even better if we turned those visits into a little group discussion. Because around Spaced Out Radio, we subscribe to the idea of ladies first, I introduce Zelia Edgar. Zelia has been researching the paranormal for over a decade. She has worked as both a field investigator and Wisconsin State Director for MUFON, leaving to focus her attention on her own research, and now hosts her own YouTube channel called Just Another Tinfoil Hat, as well as a podcast by the same name. She's young, but with an eye, talent, and experience of a seasoned veteran, she is sure to go far in this field. In fact, she's scheduled to give her second talk at the annual Van Meter Festival in Van Meter, Iowa, this September. Stephen Ward is also a returning guest. Oops, as I drop some stuff, because, you know, it's Sunday. Things around here are a little looser. We they leave this place alone for a couple days, and I stroll on in, and everything gets all messed up. So Stephen Ward is a returning guest with a big pedigree. Influenced by the March 1966 Michigan UFO flap and the Point Pleasant, West Virginia Mothman events, Steve would be drawn to investigate the paranormal. Influenced by John Keel and Jaques Vallee, he looks at the world within the weird, believing that many experiences do not fit with the conventional labels we give them. He does more than just research, though. Steve is also a correspondent on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files and hosts his own podcast called The High Strangeness Factor. Along with that, he's finding the time to co-author a book that will be released sometime later this year. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. We had so much fun individually last time. Those were two really quick 3-hour shows. And I just want to say thank you for coming on together, because this is going to be a lot of fun too.
Well, thanks for having us back. And I do remember Sunday at Detroit Dragway. At least for me, it was Detroit.
Zelia, do you remember it? Because I feel really old remembering it.
See, I don't remember it in particularly what it was from, but I do remember the phrase Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. So that is somewhere back in my subconscious. But thank you, too, for having me back on. I'm very excited to be here.
It seems as though probably every metropolitan area had some sort of dirt track or drag race track that seemed to have something going on, apparently on Sunday.
You know, for Zelia, it was probably her past life she's remembering, to remember that at all.
Regressing just a little bit there, sorry.
Well, you know, one of the things I like about the two of you, because you work together but you do separate research as well, is that you guys like to look at these topics beyond kind of what we've taken as the accepted answer or the accepted somewhat explanation, and dig deep into them and sort of maybe look where we're not looking and look at possibilities that other people might be ignoring. Steve, how did you get involved in that?
Well, I started out as I guess the thing that, I was introduced to UFOs a couple times when I was younger and thought it was a pretty cool idea to think that these things might be real because I was a science fiction fan and so forth. But I guess it was in March 1966 when the things were pretty much landing in my backyard in Michigan. There was that huge flap. Of course, it wasn't just in Michigan, but the newspapers were full of it, and they even took some of it seriously. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, then of Project Blue Book, we've got that TV show out now, he came on the scene. And it's very, very memorable because he, during a press conference, tried to explain that some of the sightings might be caused by swamp gas. And, of course, that's all the press needed to hear. All UFO sightings from all time were, of course, swamp gas. But that's what started it. And but it was and I was very comfortable in what we think of as the ET hypothesis, thinking that it seemed to be, when you looked at a lot of the reports and the landings and people seeing humanoid occupants sometimes nearby the craft, it seemed logical that they were probably from other planets. But then I read John Keel. Now, John Keel, we pretty much know as the author of the Mothman Prophecies. But prior to that, he wrote a book called UFOs Operation Trojan Horse. And that really messed me up. At first I came kind of kicking and screaming because Keel started to connect all these things together. He was a student of Charles Fort. Charles Fort, of course, wrote those 4 great books, starting out with The Book of the Damned, where he collected all these events from scientific journals, strange falls of fish, strange lights in the sky, and so forth. And Fort said, you can measure a circle beginning anywhere. Well, Keel started to see that these things seem to connect. There seem to be patterns. And he was leaning away from the ET hypothesis. Well, he did convince me. After reading the book, I was intellectually honest about it. And I thought, well, there's something not quite right about the ET theory. And then, and I'll end my little talk here, I barely recovered from Trojan Horse. And then I read Jacques Vallee's Passport to Magonia, where he connects folklore and modern-day UFO experiences. And after that, I was never the same.
Zelia, you're kind of you are the young one of the three of us. But yet you have, over a decade of research behind you already?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started pretty young. I can't remember a time I wasn't interested in all of this kind of weirder stuff, the paranormal and the unexplained. And I've been seriously, constantly researching it since I was about 8, 9 years old. And I first started actually in a cryptozoological angle, definitely Sasquatch and the man-wolf. Those were 2 of my absolute favorite cryptids. And so, I got interested in that aspect of it and read every book that I could find at the library, which actually included John Keel's Strange Creatures from Time and Space. And for years, I didn't even realize that I had read that. It was actually just last year, because I remembered there was this awesome encyclopedia of all this, unexplained stuff, and I could never remember what it was or who wrote it. And just last year, I'm going through, I finally got a copy of Strange Creatures from Time and Space, even though I think it's under that different title because it's been released a few different times. And sure enough, it was John Keel. But yeah, no, I've been interested in the paranormal, and again, from mainly the conventional standpoint, of the very separate, cryptozoology, spectrology, and ufology are 3 separate fields since that time. But it was really reading, John Keel. I read the Mothman Prophecies then when I was 17, and that just absolutely changed how I looked at all of this stuff. And it took me a while to kind of get to that point, because it's the conventional modes of thinking on this, it's just kind of what people expect. But reading Mothman Prophecies, and then I went to Operation Trojan Horse, it just absolutely revolutionized, my way of looking at each of these different types of phenomena, if indeed they are different.
That's the interesting question, isn't it? The more we kind of look at some of these these topics and specific events within the topics, and even other researchers out there in the field. It seems as though there is becoming an idea that all of this is interrelated, and that idea is becoming a bit more accepted by people. But you guys have been kind of following that idea for quite a while, long before everybody else was jumping on the bandwagon, haven't you?
Yes. Zelia mentioned Strange Creatures from Time and Space. What's the recent version? Is it The Guide to Mysterious Beings? Is that what it is?
Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If people can find it.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
There was another one in the 90s that I think said the Encyclopedia of Mysterious Beings or something like that, something weird like that. It's had like 3 different renditions.
And it's trade paper size, but that kind of, when I read that paved the way a little bit for Trojan Horse, because while it's he talks about, close encounters, creatures, aliens, or whatever, that's when he first starts talking about window areas and trying to come to grips with why is it that different types of what we think of as different types of phenomena all come together in one area. So that kind of was a kind of a baby step getting toward Trojan Horse. And so I kind of recommend people read that one first so that Trojan Horse isn't future shock, so to speak.
You mentioned window areas, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, because I don't know what causes a window area to sort of appear or be created or sort of stand out. Is it maybe the people in that area? Is there a connection or a common situation or idea between these different window areas? But it does seem as though there are some areas, many areas really, where things are kind of clustered together.
Oh yeah, I mean, the short answer is like no one really has, a definite idea of exactly, why these areas exist. I mean, of course, you have some theories like Ivan Sanderson was a proponent of the vial vortices, which was kind of in tune with also the notion of ley lines, that there might be places just with massively different, energetic like phenomena going on. Then too, I have also heard that some people believe that, it might have something to do with the people in the area, that, some people are almost like psychic receptors or things like that. And if you have a high number of these people in a specific area, stuff is likelier to happen. And then, of course, too, you have, people who talk about just different waterways, just geomagnetism, differences in that. So, it's an interesting concept, all of them.
Yeah, there are some people that really look at the geography of an area and quartz and the waterways. If you look at the infamous Skinwalker Ranch out in northeast Utah that has been written about, where all kinds of strange things have happened, and the family that owned the ranch there sold it to Bigelow, the big aerospace guy, and then he set up the National Institute for Discovery Science to check things out. But that the history of that area goes way back, and the Native Americans called it the path that was in the path of the Skinwalker. And you look back in the 50s or whatever, there was a guy named Junior Hicks, a local high school teacher, that chronicled all kinds of. There's a book that was written by Frank Salisbury based on his research called The Utah UFO Display. And it's just crazy, the stuff that was going on there. And then when you get into the incidents of the Skinwalker Ranch, it gets even crazier. And it's an area where if you isolate certain things, you could say, well, it's ET. We're seeing strange craft and everything. But when you look at the broad spectrum, people are hearing disembodied voices. People are seeing creatures that have kind of that predator effect on them. People are having like classic hauntings and things displaced. But anyway, so whatever was going on there, the Native Americans knew about it forever. And one other maybe quick thing, Linda Godfrey has done a lot of research into cryptids, especially what they call the dog man, these upright canids that people keep seeing. And one thing she found was, by accident, that the clusters of these sightings of these kind of creatures were if she overlaid a map of mounds in southern Wisconsin, I think she said it was the Panther Mounds, effigy mounds, and the Water Spirit effigy mounds were almost exact to where these things were being seen. John Keel, in one of his books, perhaps the Mothman Prophecies, when he talks about the mounds and how strange lights and phenomena have been seen around the mounds forever, he wondered what came first. Did the ancients build the mounds and their powerful belief system create the phenomena, or did they build the mounds in response to this phenomena? So that doesn't really answer your question, but there is some kind of link between certain areas and, all these things that seem to occur. And you're right, there are we all know of certain areas like the Skinwalker Ranch. Well, Point Pleasant, the Ohio Valley there, although it doesn't seem to be as active as it used to be, although people still seem to see things. But it's I don't really have a good answer as to why particular areas yield this kind of phenomena.
I can accept that. I threw it out there because it popped into my head with the way you guys look at things a little bit differently. It seemed like you would be the experts to ask on that. And you had mentioned Linda Godfrey, and she, of course, brought really Dogman to the prominence with, was it Beast of Bray Road?
Yes.
Yes. And I should know that because I lived up in the area. But when does Dogman sort of become a topic of discussion? Because it seems like it wasn't really discussed, and then all of a sudden now I would say that of the reports that are received, it's almost maybe 60% Bigfoot to 40% kind of a Dogman-like creature. When did it begin to sort of become noticed in the public eye?
I heard a Dogman-like encounter on a radio show before Linda Godfrey's book, but it was kind of isolated, and it was she really, like you say, she brought it into prominence. I had another thought here that I lost, but there's actually a podcast called Dogman Encounters Radio, headed by Vic Cundiff, and he has had people come on to talk about their experiences, and a lot of them, a lot of them sound very credible, but a lot go back years, 20 years or more, and the pattern is like that. We thought this was crazy, we wouldn't tell anybody, but now we have a forum where you can do it. It's almost like Everett, that even as weird as a Bigfoot encounter is, it's almost okay to report that. But an upright canid, walking around with yellow eyes, that might be just a little bit too much.
Zelia, let's pretend that these are strictly a physical creature. Doesn't it make more sense maybe that Dogman would be able to survive more so than, say, a Bigfoot in some of the areas that they report consistent sightings of these types of creatures?
I could see that being the case, simply because so many of them, the interesting thing is that a lot of sightings, the classic one, with the Beast of Bray Road, it was observed eating roadkill. And so in a way, again, back to like the point of diet, that seems like they are very much, heavy scavengers, and going after things that have already been taken down by something else. So I could see that being the case, that they would kind of be a little bit likelier to survive over Bigfoot. I do think there is, I see Bigfoot is one of those things that, old habits die hard. That's the one that for some reason I just don't want to give up to the ultra-terrestrial phenomenon completely. So I do think that there is the potential that there is enough of resources in our environments for a population of some type of unknown primate to exist. But yeah, I could see what you mean where, a Dogman or man-wolf-like creature might have a little bit of an easier time. Simply, too, because they tend to have a much more aggressive nature than Bigfoot, which I think kind of ups the survival ante a little bit.
You mentioned... Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Keel even talks about, not Dogman in particular, but his idea was that these things were sort of temporal. I mean, they were physical, paraphysical. They sort of like exist and then sort of dissipate, I guess. That they would, come about and even be involved in scavenging and eating roadkill or whatever, and then going away. And now that's, again, that's the ultra-terrestrial idea, which was actually a kind of a literary device that he used. But one thing I wanted to point out when we talk about the interdimensional nature of some of these creatures, Keel suggested that they sort of, weren't really coming from elsewhere per se, but they were sort of transmogrifications of energy somehow. He wasn't even actually able to describe the process exactly. But if, let's just say, Bigfoot is, in quotes, interdimensional, does that mean he's a physical creature that can somehow go elsewhere through a portal or somewhere else and then come back? Or is he somebody that's literally phases in and out of existence? I mean, the atoms separate or come together or whatever. There's two different concepts there. And sometimes people will just throw the word around, interdimensional, and not really define it.
We've got about 2 minutes before we have to go to break, and I'll throw this out there, and I don't expect either one of you to finish your answer before we have to go to break, so we'll pick it up afterwards. But is it possible that there could be two distinct types of, whether it be Bigfoot or Dogman? Could one be an interdimensional being and one be a strictly physical being?
I'm going to go with my personal opinion on this being a yes.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
That gets into the paranormal mimicry that we talked a little bit about before.
It's all of a sudden we've opened up another door that we're going to close temporarily as we step out for our first break already. So if you guys can just hold on for a second, we're going to step out on Spaced Out Sunday. We'll be right back.
Hey, Spaced Out Radio fans! It's John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. Our goal is to make the life of veterans, first responders, and those with rare medical conditions 10% happier. We do this by donating one grant item, ranging from dance to therapy programs to prosthetic limbs, to those who need it most. To contribute to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and become a donor today.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
At spacedoutradio.com, we are keeping you up to date on all the news with the SOR Newswire. Captain Shirk leads the team that is bringing you the news of the day and exclusive stories on everything paranormal and supernatural. It's free to read, it's updated daily, and it's right there for you. The SOR Newswire is a one-stop shop for the news of the day. Check it out at spacedoutradio.com today.
Are you looking for great advertising value for your company? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. We have a multitude of places to get your name out there, including commercial ads during the show, special promotions, and banners on our website. Our audience is proven to support the companies that support our show. We can make your budget work for you. So for more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you addicted to the woo? Good, me too.
This is Dave Scott, and you can woo it up with me every Monday through Friday, starting at 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, for 3 hours of great entertainment in the subjects you love. UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, intuition. Yes, we hit it all 5 days a week. Look for us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, my friends, we own the night.
You wanted new SOR gear, and now you can have it. The SOR Vault is fully stocked with t-shirts, hats, hoodies, mugs, and everything in between, with great logos for you to choose from. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com, click on the SOR Vault, and go shopping. Pricing is quite affordable, and you can look good representing your favorite show. So go to our website and pick up your new SOR wear at the SOR Vault today.
From the heartlands of Canada to beards around the world, we know how to take care of you. Fill your follicles with the Mighty Moose Beard Oil. All our oils and balms are handmade and 100% natural ingredients because we care about your beard. And hey, use the promo code SOR2019 and get your Mighty Moose Beard Oil today. You can check us out on our website, mightymoosebeard.com.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckard, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio, and while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Cold drinks, great food, and the best music in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is the place to be, open until 2 a.m. nightly. Everything on the menu starts at just $6.95. Who serves food that cheap anymore? At the Moose, you'll never know who you'll run into. Rock stars, actors, athletes. It's the place everyone wants to be. So join us at the Moose Vancouver, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Ryan Stacy from the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightlines Report. Together, we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences you've had. We're looking for answers just like you. So fill out a Sightlines Report on the Spaced Out Radio website and let's figure out what's going on together.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. You guys know that I'm gonna do that now for the rest of the show. Just because I had to put that in the intro. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer, and thank you for spending your evening with us. Don't forget, if you've missed any part of the show, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping in the Spaced Out Radio Vault, where you can pick yourself up a Team Stump t-shirt, and you need that. You need that in your life. You can also join the Space Travelers Club there, where for $5 a month, you get to join our forums, throw your voice and opinion in there, hop into our never-ending live ongoing chat that just seems to go on throughout the day, every day, and so much more. Tonight, we are joined by Zelia Edgar and Steve Ward. And on their own, they are both fantastic researchers, show hosts. But together, they are a lot of fun to talk to. We talked straight through the break. We almost missed the fact that the show was going to start. Zelia, Steve, I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
It's always a good time to be on your show.
Oh, yeah. This is awesome.
Before the break, we were talking about the idea of could Bigfoot be interdimensional and physical in nature, sort of two sort of species. And Zelia, I believe you mentioned, or no, Steve, it was you that mentioned the idea that there's sort of maybe a physical being that can go through some portal or something like that. Has there been...
There's...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, yes, it perhaps. I mean, we have the situation where people see them appear and disappear sometimes. They've even people have claimed to have seen footprints appear in the ground when there was no Bigfoot there. There's an interesting book called Valley of the Skookum. It's written by Sally Shepard Wolford, who is the mother of Autumn Williams. Autumn Williams is a famous Bigfoot researcher. When Autumn was between about 3 and 6 years old, they lived in Ording, Washington, and they had all kinds of apparently flesh and blood Bigfoot phenomena. But then there were certain aspects where they would see glowing Bigfoot sometimes at night. Sometimes they would seem to appear and disappear. You had the really strange case in southwestern Pennsylvania, 1973-74. This is Stan Gordon wrote a book on this called Silent Invasion. And they're just bizarre Bigfoot reports. Green glowing eyes. There was a woman that heard a commotion on her porch, thought dogs were getting into her trash again. She goes outside. This is 73. She doesn't have the Bigfoot, vocabulary. She said there was a big gorilla on her porch. She shoots it point blank with a shotgun, and it disappeared in a hail of sparks. There was another crazy incident where they saw what appeared to be some kind of craft or whatever. It was all lit up light in a field. They saw 2 other Bigfoots walking away from this. They took a shot at it. They didn't seem to respond. As soon as they shot the gun, the craft, if that's even what it was, completely winked out. The Bigfoots disappeared or went away. One of the witnesses, when the police showed up, he was out in the field. He was acting as if he was possessed somehow, was growling and stamping his feet, and he came out of that spell. Stan Gordon and his team later on, they thought, well, we'd like to put this guy under regressive hypnosis, but we better wait a while. So eventually they did. And then when they came to him, they asked him, he said, do you mind if we do this just because you had such a strange experience? And he said, well, what do you mean? You guys came back 2 weeks later and did that. He said that a man dressed like an Air Force officer and a plainclothes man put him under hypnosis, said they would get back to him with the results. They did not. Showed him photographs of UFOs and so forth. This is sort of a classic Man in Black experience. But the point is that you have the really crazy, ethereal, if you will, Bigfoot reports in Pennsylvania, for example. But then you have the classic ones in the North Woods that where people have gotten hairs from Bigfoot. They seem to have gotten some results with DNA evidence. I don't. It seems there may well be more than one answer, and maybe Zelia has a better idea than I do. But there's some that seems like if you just ignore the other, it's physical. It's an unknown creature that has remained elusive. But then when you look at the other aspects, you think, well, how the heck does this tie in with any sense of physical reality?
Zelia, I want to ask you, does this mean then if these beings are interdimensional, but yet there are also some physical beings and they're breeding, they're maintaining their population, they're somehow related then, aren't they? I mean, I can't imagine an interdimensional being being able to mate with something that's strictly physical. I guess I should have flipped those around and said it a little bit different way. But are they then related? And how does that play into the idea of maybe a being or an entity sort of raising their vibration and becoming their own sort of spiritual being?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I do think, it's like Steve was even saying, there's so many encounters on each side of the fence, so to speak. And it's hard to think that they could possibly be unrelated because they are, in all intents and purposes, they look and behave very similar. It's just that one appears to be almost completely physical and one appears to be almost completely non-physical. And the point that I've gotten to, because for a while there I was thinking, I had this running theory that perhaps, yes, a lot of this phenomenon is reflective of something. And so perhaps in these cases where you do have the very high strangeness factor with Bigfoot, such as disappearing in a hail of sparks, or even there's this one case from Arlington, West Virginia, where a sighting of a Bigfoot apparently stopped a guy's car twice. Or
yes.
Yeah, that's a classic. Or the Rochdale, Indiana creature, which left no footprints. It was spotted walking through a muddy field, and there was no trace of it left behind. So for a while there, I was thinking, okay, maybe, these kind of like immaterial sightings, or these ones that produce electromagnetic effects, because we see that quite a bit with cryptids as well. Maybe this is a reflection of a very real physical animal that is simply an undiscovered primate. So that would kind of account for the physical sightings. You have an actual animal, and then these kind of non-physical immaterial sightings, it's a mimic of that. To this day, I'm not really sure. Another possibility is maybe we are dealing with something that is simply, and this is a really new thing that I've kind of been toying with, maybe we are dealing with a population of some sort of unknown primate that does have the ability to radically alter its electromagnetic structure to the point that it does become ultra-terrestrial or super spectrum. It is, for all intents and purposes, a physical animal, a physical being, yet somehow by manipulating its inherent electromagnetism, it can disappear and it can affect these electromagnetic changes, and it can, vanish. So, these are all just, again, theories to account for something that is truly very strange, and something that is a lot stranger than simply an undiscovered creature, in my opinion.
Okay, wow. When we talk these topics, there is so much to kind of ponder and think about. It can be tough to comprehend, but both of you do so well in explaining it in a way that even I can understand. And Steve, I want to take a quick detour here because you had mentioned the Men in Black. And I was involved in a conversation earlier this week where we were talking about the Men in Black. And I want to get your guys' opinion on the reporting or the occurrence of sightings of them in recent years, as everybody seems to be getting a doorbell camera, a security camera pointing towards the front of their home or building. We used to hear these reports of the Men in Black coming to the front door and seeming to know something and knocking and asking questions. Have those reports kind of died away as everybody now seems to have some sort of camera pointed at their front door or at their business?
I don't know. I haven't really heard too much in the way of more recent ones. I'm trying to actually slip a book out here so I can. Oh, there it goes. Starting to fall. So I can get a name here right. That's another. This is another area that seems to break up into categories. There are some encounters that seem to be government people. Flesh and blood. People that are interested in your UFO sighting. They may confiscate your photographs, and then you don't hear from them again. There are others that are very John Keel even thought that some of the stranger ones might be illusory, not that people were hallucinating, but that some outside stimulus or something was creating these, but they weren't real physical events. If you go back and look at there's a book called Demonolatry by Nicholas Remy. He was a witch hunter apparently, and his concern was these women consulting with the devil and so forth. But when you look at a lot of the description of the devil, they mimic some modern day Men in Black experiences, dark clothing, wearing dark hats and so forth. There's just a lot of strange demons, for example, didn't have any vocal cords. So when they spoke, their voice just seemed to be outside of them somehow. Well, there are entity reports like that. I think it's Gary Wilcox, I think. I can't remember the state, but it was a classic encounter with supposedly entities inside a craft, and it wasn't telepathy he was experiencing, but he could hear their voice somehow. This is something that shows up now and then. It's just that when you look at folklore with the demons and so forth, or beliefs in the devil, and look at some of the more modern day supposed encounters with the men in black, there are some similarities there. Even the smell of sulfur sometimes. There's one. There's so many, but let me just give you one case. Jenny, a great researcher, great British researcher, Jenny Randalls. There was a lady in England. She had a sighting of a UFO. Some men came to the door. They came in a car. They didn't look like they were demons or devils or ethereal or whatever, and the parents didn't even know why they let them in without any question. And they started asking the daughter that's had the sighting, one of them was asking her a question, just kind of firing questions at her. And she was very uncomfortable. And they weren't particularly probing questions. And then later on, Jenny Randalls got the idea to put this woman under hypnosis to see what she was feeling at the time. Well, she found out that this woman, at least from her viewpoint, one of the men was asking her questions verbally. In between, the other one was sending her a telepathic question. And it went back and forth, and she was very disturbed because she wasn't understanding what was going on. And I think, what the heck? And like in so many of these instances, they weren't I can't remember what the questions were, but they weren't particularly interesting or probing or whatever. They were nonsensical almost. So how do you explain something like that?
Oh, that's tough. Zelia, do you think then that this could be maybe an event or an instance or a type of occurrence where these interdimensional beings are maybe creating these men in black to kind of learn what we take away from experiences with them?
See, that's that's an interesting question, because that was my initial response, reading, because the Mothman Prophecies, of course, deals quite a bit with the men in black. And, then to Keel's later books deals with a lot of the more stranger accounts that definitely had oftentimes very occult type undertones. And initially, of course, ostensibly the reason that these things are showing up is to garner information about the witnesses, and sometimes not even so much about their sightings, but about their personal lives. However, the issue that I started having with that, which I think Keel pointed out in one of his books or articles, is that oftentimes these beings, someone will have a paranormal experience. It's not always a UFO. Sometimes it's a cryptid encounter. Sometimes it's a ghost encounter or something like that. And before they even tell anybody, these beings are there talking to them about the experience or talking to them about their lives, and usually insinuating that they shouldn't discuss the experience that they had. So the issue I have with this ostensible reason of wanting to know about the witness or about the experience is that oftentimes these beings already have very particular knowledge about the witness and about the experience. So that makes it 10 times creepier to me, actually, is the fact that, it's kind of like their mission of, gathering this information has already been accomplished prior to them showing up, prior to them appearing.
That's a good point, Zelia, that sometimes Stan Gordon there were a lot of Bigfoot reports, and Men in Black would show up with Bigfoot witnesses as well, and even seen destroying evidence, footprints and so forth. Keel found the same thing in UFO landings. So it's just and again, some of it seems very, very physical, and other seems very non-physical. The one thing that might enter into this is Jaques Vallee, who has written many books on UFOs, but he wrote Passport to Magonia with the folklore connection. He states it might even be in Messengers of Deception, I'm not sure, he states the phenomenon negates itself. And what he means is some of these cases involve such high strangeness that people don't even want to report the whole thing because it's so crazy. It sort of cancels itself out. and also, like we were just talking about, the situation where somebody sees a UFO and then somebody shows up, the government or whatever, and tells them not to talk about it. So you get this sort of canceling effect. Either the account is so strange it doesn't get reported or completely reported, or it does get reported or experienced, and then somebody comes and tells you to shut up.
I'm curious.
Almost like the trickster.
I'm curious, and I've heard this before, the idea of men in black appearing after, say, a haunting or poltergeist type experience. What would be the purpose of appearing with something like that, or after something like that?
I'm sure Zelia has the answer because I don't.
Well, let me look at my big book of answers now.
Well, I just wonder if it hints at the idea that everything is somewhat connected. Because it makes no sense.
I think it really does. And, especially, too, because I feel like ghosts and hauntings are among the most personal type of experiences. Because a lot of times, you see a cryptid, and even though, don't get me wrong, cryptids and UFOs can become very personal, the initial sighting, UFOs and monsters, they are typically out there. But with ghosts and hauntings, we do also have this idea that this is something that, in most cases, usually there's a long history of it. It's been there for a while. It's almost like it's something that belongs to a place. And I'm not sure how true that concept is, but I feel like it's very entrenched kind of in our cultural mindset. And so with, the Men in Black showing up for that, it's strange because it's not really like, I feel like, too, ghost sightings don't typically go very reported, if that makes sense. Like, yes, people will, ask for help about them and want it to be investigated and stuff like that, but it's not really like, it doesn't have the same effect of I saw, a UFO. And so the interesting thing is that, the Men in Black are still showing up for these very typically long-running experiences when there's really no actionable thing on the part of, again, if we think that they're possibly government-related or they want to come across that way, you can definitely see the interest there for UFOs, and you can also kind of see it for cryptids. But with ghosts, or hauntings, that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, is there any... I'm sorry to cut you off, Steve. I just wanted to ask...
That's fine.
And you both can answer this. Is there any commonality between the hauntings that seem to bring them out? Because there seem to be so many hauntings in every town. But it's a relatively rare occurrence where the Men in Black are spotted at these. So I was just wondering if either of you knew maybe there was some sort of type of specific event or commonality that surround these that draw out the Men in Black.
I don't know too many cases where a haunting has drawn out the Men in Black. But one thing is kind of the reverse is kind of true, where Keel talks about in Mothman Prophecies how somebody might have a close encounter of a UFO, and then for the next 2 weeks, they've got an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena in their home. There was a Swedish researcher whose name escapes me. Brent Rains talks about it in his book on John Keel. But he went and he followed behind Keel, interviewed some of the very same Mothman witnesses and some other ones. And virtually all of them had outbreaks of a poltergeist occurrence after they had seen the Mothman creature or apparition, whatever it was.
Zelia, your thoughts?
As far as which type of haunting, I'm not really entirely sure. I feel like, too, it's kind of, a lot of the times these are also figures in hauntings, these Men in Black, or even like the Hat Man is kind of a new subset of that. But yes, I've also noticed, too, the poltergeist outbreak thing, which is very, very intriguing. And Ivan Sanderson even talked about that at nearing the end of Invisible Residence, that also seems tied to particularly a lot of UFO encounters, which again, too, for a long time, people thought of poltergeist as being exclusively tied to latent telekinetic ability or some sort of ghost. So it's just interesting how, all these things kind of coalesce the further along you go.
Well, and may I add really quickly, the gentleman I'm writing the book with, Parallels and Patterns, a New Paradigm for the study of paranormal phenomena, Joey Medea, he and his wife investigated a haunted library for 2 years in North Carolina. They saw, she was an intuitive, and he they would use both, the ghost box devices and mediumship and so forth. They were seeing classic apparitions of men in black with the fedora, the long dark coat, and so forth. And they even seemed to be harassing like another spirit or entity dwelling in the library. Now, that's just a mind blower, but it fits right into what you're talking about.
Well, when Zelia mentioned the Hat Man, right away I went to the idea, and again, this seems to be a pattern in the paranormal in general now, the idea that could Men in Black, the Hat Man, and Black-Eyed Kids all be sort of the same thing, but just appearing differently in some respects?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, and another thing before Zelia talks, it just reminded me that we've lost, of course, a great researcher this past year, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is also a good friend. It's her publishing company that's going to be publishing our book, by the way. It was her idea that we do it. But she, we met her my wife and I met her at the Mothman Festival, and she was studying shadow people. People were having these bedroom invasions and other places. They'd see the Hat Man or the shadow person or whatever. Well, the next year when she gave her talk, she discovered that a significant percentage of those people experiencing shadow people were also classic alien abductees. Now, who would have seen that coming?
Now, was there sort of a time frame where maybe they saw the shadow person for a month or so before the abduction, or could it have been they saw the shadow person 6 months ago and now they're being abducted? Is there a time frame there?
That I don't know. I don't know how detailed her research was, but because she was open in her approach. I mean, there are people that she has told me, and Stan Gordon has told me, that they've talked to witnesses that had been interviewed by other people that would say, well, yes, we saw the Bigfoot, but we saw this strange light in the sky. Well, we don't want to hear about your UFO report. We want to hear about the Bigfoot, and vice versa. We don't want to hear about you seeing a Bigfoot. We want to hear about the alien spacecraft you saw, because some people are so compartmentalized. But because she was an open-minded researcher, she found this crazy connection.
That is fascinating. Zelia, we got about a minute left. I'll give you the final thought on this.
I do think that there are, just the connection thing is a huge deal for me. And especially, with the different types, the different subsets of kind of these creepy characters of the Men in Black and the Black-Eyed Kids, I do genuinely think they all may be the same type of entity.
I have to kind of agree with you guys.
I mean, and a huge thing with that, too, is kind of their symbolic connection to crossroads and intersecting areas and doorways. A lot of them, that's exactly where they show up. And I think that the symbols behind this are important, too, no matter what part of the phenomenon you're looking at.
With that, we're going to step out for another break. We will be right back on Spaced Out Sunday.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
If you like it hot, real hot, then heat up your meals with Bumblefoot hot sauce.
Get your Bumblefoot hot sauce today. The sauce, Bumblicious, and the 4 million Scoville unit Bumble. We're going in hot, real hot, coming out even hotter.
Keep the milk nearby and tantalize your taste buds tonight.
Bumblefoot hot sauce, available now at kajans.com.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother is watching.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at mightymoosebeard.com today.
Hi, this is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report. Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you'd know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I'm bringing you the Woo every Monday through Friday on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going all out to bring you the strangest, oddest stories and subjects I could find for your entertainment. Why? Because when we hit peak Woo, I know I've done my job. So come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com, 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, and together, my friends, we own the night.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates. KDNF AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas. KDUN AM 1030 in Reedsport, Oregon. KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California. WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia. And UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. For our digital listeners, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at the Spaced Out Radio Vault, and reading up on the SOR Newswire, where you can find Dave's weekly blog, all kinds of weird stories, and so much more. Now, tonight we're talking to Zelia Edgar from the Just Another Tinfoil Hat YouTube channel and Stephen Ward from the High Strange... I'm sorry, Stephen, I lost my notes. It's the High Strangeness Factor, correct?
Yes, on Paranormal UK Radio. Both our shows are on Paranormal UK Radio.
Yes, excellent. Before the break, we were kind of talking about the idea of Bigfoot and Men in Black and sort of the interconnectedness of everything. And I want to switch gears a little bit here because, Zelia, you did a fantastic series on an airship flap back in the late 1800s. Can you tell us a little bit about these events?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, the 3-part video series that I did was on the airship wave of 1896 and 97. And it was a large scale of sightings across the U.S. It started in California in August of 1896 and then continued on through January of that year, mainly in California, before kind of reappearing on the East Coast and then across the central United States in the early months of 1897. And what's amazing about this is that technically, yeah, it's the airship flap. People were seeing these amazing flying machines that they described as, kind of how you would imagine sort of very steampunk technology, these balloons with carriages underneath them, and some of them had rudders and some had wings. But among that, too, you also had, it was very much like a modern UFO flap where people weren't just seeing one type of object. Amongst these ships, there were also things that looked like boats. There were also sightings of large bird-shaped objects, sightings of fireballs and twinkling lights in the sky. There's even, and then you have these really just bizarre reports, such as a square sheet of canvas in the wind. So, I mean, it was a very, very interesting flap there. And yeah, so it started in California in late 1896 and then moved across the states in 97.
How far east did it get?
I think one of the earliest sightings in 97 was Delaware, if I remember. Yep, Delaware. And then it kind of, it didn't really settle on the coast there. It's really kind of took place mostly in the central United States. Like Ohio was a huge hotbed of sightings. There were several in Nebraska, Kansas, Michigan, some in Illinois and Wisconsin as well.
And this seems like it's a little bit overlooked because until I saw your series, I had heard a couple of reports or stories about these, but I didn't even know it was a flap that really went from one coast to the other.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is, there were, of course, just like with modern UFO accounts, there was some, like fantastic reports that are definitely questionable in the papers. But the truth of it is that there is a huge core of very genuine reports from this era. And I think that a huge reason why it is overlooked is because of the predominant belief structure of the day. The interesting thing that we have here, and this is what really sparked my interest in this particular flap, and I will say, too, there were sightings of, airships as early as late 1850s, particularly in Europe, and they continued through the early 1900s. But just focusing in on 1896-97 in the United States, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of accounts of seeing these things. But the reason I believe they are really overlooked is because the belief structure was such that people did not believe that they were seeing extraterrestrials. They genuinely believed that someone had finally conquered the ultimate flying machine, and that these were human, inventors and crews that were flying these objects. And that's the very, very interesting point to me, because in a lot of these cases, there are cases of contact with the occupants of these objects, and they appear to be human. And the witness believes that they are indeed inventors and, crew members of these flying machines. However, the very, very interesting point that really, really caught my eye is that, to me, it kind of marks this huge turning point, because, of course, the extraterrestrial hypothesis for sightings of things in the sky, that really kicked into gear in the mid-1900s. And prior to this current hypothesis, that of, space aliens visiting planet Earth and flying saucers and UFOs, you have fairy lore and kind of the more mythological aspects, fairies and demons and angels and things like that. That's kind of the predominant belief for sightings of things in the sky. But with the airship, it's this really interesting turning point where, as people are becoming more interested in technology and technological advancement, that is exactly what the model of belief assumes. And then too, furthermore, that's what the phenomenon itself actually assumes in how it relates to people, because you have these sightings of very human occupants who, there's even one particular case where they give some guy a couple bucks to go and fetch them some things at the store to repair their flying machine. And so to me, it just kind of goes so far as to prove that the phenomenon, not prove per se, but it offers strong evidence that the phenomenon is reflective to our belief systems and our models of belief.
Well, that brings up a question, and I'm going to ask you this, Steve. We are so used to the idea of a UFO looking like some form of sleek, sort of unflyable type of craft. Since, let's say 1947. That's kind of been what we picture as a UFO. And Zelia mentioned that these looked very steampunkish, which, for people who aren't familiar with the idea of steampunk, it is sort of industrial, very mechanical looking, which would be quite different from what we today would maybe expect a UFO to look for or look like. But that would fit into what people at that time might expect to see. How does that play into maybe the sociology or the psychology of these kinds of sightings?
Sort of like Jules Verne. As a matter of fact, I think his novel about the Master of the World was inspired by those sightings, about kind of a dirigible-like craft. But that's a good point, because these things were ahead of the time. They were ahead of Zeppelins and dirigibles, even though there may have been some up there. So it's like the phenomena is always a few steps ahead of us technologically, and just like the airships were. So, and then also when you get into in the 30s in northern Sweden, they were seeing something they called the ghost flyers. This predated the ghost rockets, which was another phenomena. But way up in northern Sweden, in these little towns, in the winter, dead of winter, they would hear these craft come over. And when they saw them, they had as many as 8 propellers on them. I mean, way ahead of anything that's was available at the time. And they would shine these searchlights down on these little towns. And if you followed the trajectory, it's sort of like they went from Sweden and then up and then down to through Norway. rather the reverse, Norway and then over to Sweden. And so again, when people would see these things, they were technologically advanced, even though they were aircraft planes. They were way ahead of anything else, and they couldn't figure out where they were coming from. We didn't have any aircraft carriers or platforms out there that they could have landed on. The implication was almost that they were coming from some hidden base in the north, but it just lasted so long and then went away. So it's just another case where people are seeing strange things in the sky. They're ahead of us technologically.
Zelia, do you think that with us talking about the idea that everything is sort of connected interdimensionally, is it possible that these craft were maybe they were what they were, but they were intentionally making them appear as something that maybe those people would recognize as something plausible in their world at that time?
I would say yes to that, yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing is that, too, you have the same behaviors, almost the same script carried out throughout the ages. Something very striking is there's this weird thing where UFO occupants often request water. And we see this, even in current UFO reports. A great example is Joe Simonton and the Alien Pancakes, where they, pretty much landed in his backyard and requested water. And of course, too, that's very common in fairy lore. And even this particular behavior was shown by the occupants of these airships time and time again. So I do think that, whatever this phenomenon is, I think that it is semi-dependent somehow on our belief structures and kind of creates these images to correlate to something that we understand and something that, even if it's pretty far out there, ultimately we can accept.
Can I tell you a great airship story after you're done?
No, yes, please.
Okay. John Keel stumbled onto this apparently when he was in the Ohio Valley checking out the Mothman stuff. He got a hold of an old newspaper reporter named John Cole. He told him about an event that happened back in the 20s or 30s, I'm not sure. But it was in West Virginia. They saw this thing crash, and it looked like a fuselage of an airplane with no wings or whatever. So they tracked this thing down in the woods, and the people there were kind of surprised to see them. There were people that he thought were Asians, and kind of the same, some of the men in black have people say that they had kind of an Asian countenance, but they weren't Asian. And these people were kind of short, and there were some other people there that were taller but were not Asian looking. And so they said, well, everything's under control here. We're repairing this craft. And they thought, boy, this is a strange looking thing. How does it even fly? So this guy, Cole, he bent down and he called it a thingamajig off the ground. He thought, they're not going to miss this. It's a souvenir. So he takes it home that night. Now, they leave him alone. They don't know what happens to the craft, although they find out it is taken off. It leaves at some other point because the clearing is empty, but the ground, the grass and everything is pressed down. So at 2 a.m, he's asleep. He's awakened by a loud knock on the door. He goes through the door and he sees what he thinks is an army officer because he's got the wide-brimmed hat that they used to wear in World War I. And he says, "You've got something that belongs to us." And he thought he's half asleep. He can't figure out what it is. So he realizes, so he gets the thing that he picked up, whatever it was, and he hands it to him. And without a word, this guy leaves. Sort of foreshadowing Men in Black. You've got some kind of weird dirigible craft ahead of the time. You've got the entities, the individuals that look a little bit perhaps like some of the Men in Black reports. So you've got just one of these crazy occurrences that is just not explainable.
Now, this thing that he picked up, was it just a scrap piece of metal? Did it seem to have any importance?
That's what it implied. He didn't say. He just called it he told Keel it was a thingamajig. So that's all we have on it. But apparently it was either a vital piece of the craft, or it would have left maybe perhaps some evidence behind that might have proven it was something that they didn't want them to know about. Again, the phenomena negates itself.
Okay, if they didn't want to leave evidence behind, And I'm going to speak in a little bit of a generality here because this has happened on numerous times. We talked about the Simonton pancakes. Why is it that they would, if they're trying to stay hidden or not be noticed, why would they ask for something as simple as water?
That's a really good question. And, for me, I just have to wonder if there's a lot to kind of the symbolism of these events. If there's something that, in the way that they're played out time and time again, that, to bring up the collective unconscious, maybe possibly, has to do more with that than with an actual definite need for water. Because, it's such a very random thing. But, too, a really common thing with UFOs is them landing near water and, putting hoses into, like, lakes and rivers they show up near. Water treatment centers and things like that. And so like there's this strong undercurrent that they constantly are taking that in. As to whether they actually need it, I just, I can't answer that question. But again, I feel like a lot of this is kind of more for a certain effect on the witness, for them to see this more than anything.
I think that's a really good point. There was a case in the mid-'50s in California. John Black and his partner, they're miners, and they've been seeing this UFO for a while. And then at one point they see John Black is in the woods. He sees what he thinks is a young boy fishing by the stream, but it's some kind of an entity. He's gathering water in a bucket. He follows him outside the woods, and this little guy walks up a ladder into a flying saucer. I mean, what the heck? Did their water hose sucker break down where they had to gather water with a bucket? But that's a really good point, Zelia, that there's something else going on broader that we just if we look at the specific events, sometimes we miss the bigger picture.
Now, these occurrences are admittedly rare, but not unheard of. And what do you guys, I'll throw this out to both of you, what do you guys think of the idea that maybe the asking for water is a cover for some sort of gauge or test just to see how either the person would react or how maybe they can assume that most of our population would react?
I think, that brings up a huge issue that I'm trying to kind of figure out right now. And it's this kind of implied need for help or assistance that I notice a lot, especially in regards to the UFO phenomenon, where, something even like so many of sightings of close contact with UFO occupants begin with the crashing of their perceived craft. And, you'd think, too, if we are dealing with some sort of technologically advanced civilization, I'm just surprised that they apparently are driving lemons from, Alpha Centauri here to Earth. Because it seems like most of the time the craft doesn't land, it crashes. And more like beyond that as well, you also have the occupants, asking for water, asking, in the case of the airship thing, asking to please run to the store and get this stuff, asking in no uncertain terms for trades or assistance. And the interesting thing for that, it's kind of two very interesting points. The one is that we see this also in folklore and fairy lore, that a lot of cases of contact, and this has been kind of watered down even through our fairy tales, contact with the fairies or otherworldly entities often begins with a need for help or assistance or someone performing a task. And the other side of this as well is something that kind of has creepy implications, because apparently they've done, tests on like psychological tests, and to get someone to like you, they say one of the best things you can do is ask them for a favor, because that kind of ingratiates you to the person that you're asking the favor from, which kind of seems backwards, but apparently they've done extensive testing on that, and that's the case. So you have to wonder if, these requests for trades or these requests for help or, even, the UFO crash, if it's almost an attempt to make them seem like will make them something that we can associate with. And it almost, to me, too, the idea of help and assistance or trade or bartering, it almost feels like a pact, some sort of agreement. So I do think that there is, like you're saying, almost a gauge for reaction there.
Steve, your thoughts on that?
I'm going to agree with Zelia. Yeah, there's it's just very elusive. I had another thought that I lost. Maybe I'll get it back later. But yeah, the Symington thing is fascinating because that's the other part with all this. Everybody believed, including the Air Force, that Symington was telling the truth and that he had a real experience. And when you see him on the old YouTube, on YouTube, and the old film that they took of him, you kind of believe he did too. But there's this strong absurd factor. I mean, they come down, they need water in a bucket. They're cooking pancakes on a grill. Don't they have freeze-dried food? Don't they have Tang in a bag, like the astronauts did? They're taking up all this space, and it just so much. There's a strong absurd factor, and then and then there's the Zelia was mentioning the fairy folklore connection. You find out when the Air Force spends the taxpayers' money to check out these pancakes, there's no salt in them. And if you go back to Evans Wentz, who in Ireland in the early 1900s interviewed people about their experiences with the fairies, one-on-one experiences, not something their uncle experienced, but they experienced. An Irishman told Wentz, he said, Wentz's book, by the way, was The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, where he documents all this. An Irishman told him that the fairies drink fresh water, they take fresh meat, and they never take salt. Salt, of course, is traditionally something you keep evil away and undesirable things away from. So you've got this weird exchange. You've got this time and time again. You've got this absurd factor. And when you're asking about the way these things repeat, John Keel had a catchphrase. It was the great phonograph in the sky. These things keep repeating. Psychics and channelers will keep getting the same messages sometimes, and they think they're the only one that's gotten it, but it's been happening for centuries.
Well, where's the balance in the idea of extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings visiting us? Because it's hard to picture that they want to keep our knowledge of them secret, but yet then they'll just come up to a random person and ask for water or for them to run to the hardware store. It's kind of like the old argument of if they're trying to stay secret, why do they have so many lights on their UFOs? Is there a balance in there somewhere? Is it two different interdimensional plans, or is it sort of a bigger scope that maybe we don't understand?
That's it. It's a bigger scope that we don't understand. It's unfathomable. And you're right. You got this paradox of we're here. We present ourselves. Well, sometimes we show ourselves where hundreds of people are seeing us at one time. But again, then I guess you've got this. Well, look at how many people believe these experiences, even though hundreds of people see them sometimes. They're so absurd and ridiculous that it negates itself. People just simply will not believe it. And it's like at the end of, so often at the end of a newscast, you have the little chuckle about the guy that saw the UFO. There's something in the human psyche, I think, that just wants to reject this, no matter how many people have experienced it.
That makes complete sense. And there really is something to the idea that the events negate themselves. I'm coming to understand that more and more as we speak. But guys, with that, we're going to hop out for another break, and we will be right back on Spaced Out Sunday.
Cold drinks, great food, and the best music in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is the place to be, open until 2 a.m. nightly. Everything on the menu starts at just $6.95. Who serves food that cheap anymore? At the Moose, you'll never know who you'll run into. Rock stars, actors, athletes. It's the place everyone wants to be. So join us at the Moose Vancouver, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for something new to push your limits? Look Beyond the Spectrum, a new docuseries featuring some of the best researchers in the world when it comes to everything from UFOs, government cover-ups, and strange humanoids. Truth seekers Stephen Bassett, Jeff Meldrum, Jack Kasher, and Stanton Friedman, among others, all chip in to bring their knowledge to you. Beyond the Spectrum can be found on Amazon as well as Tubi TV. Tell us what you think on our Amazon page.
Are you looking for great advertising value for your company? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. We have a multitude of places to get your name out there, including commercial ads during the show, special promotions, and banners on our website. Our audience is proven to support the companies that support our show. We can make your budget work for you. So for more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
At spacedoutradio.com, we are keeping you up to date on all the news with the SOR Newswire. Captain Shirk leads the team that is bringing you the news of the day and exclusive stories on everything paranormal and supernatural. It's free to read, it's updated daily, and it's right there for you. The SOR Newswire is a one-stop shop for the news of the day. Check it out at spacedoutradio.com today.
Hello everyone, this is Ryan Stacy from the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightlines Report. Together, we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences you've had. We're looking for answers just like you. So fill out a Sightlines Report on the Spaced Out Radio website and let's figure out what's going on together.
Hello, Space Travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month and follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do? What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblelicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. You know what? I'm just going to do that every time now. From now on, that's the way it's going to be. Oh, Dave's going to hate me. I'm your host, Everthemer. Thanks for sticking around with us. This has been a fantastic discussion. We're halfway through it, and we haven't covered nearly as much as we thought we were because we keep going on these little tangents and digging into these topics, and we've got a lot more to cover. So we're going to get through this intro, and we're going to get right back into it. So, but don't forget, if you've missed any part of the show, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, going into the SOR vault, and you know it's cold. It's a little chilly out there. You need a new sweatshirt, and it's got to be a Team Stumps sweatshirt. It just does. That's the way it is. You need a Team Stump t-shirt, or I'm sorry, sweatshirt. You can also join the Space Travelers Club in there for $5 a month. You're going to get tons of bonus features, some exclusive content, the IRC perspective, all kinds of fun stuff. And so with that, I'm bringing back in Zelia Edgar and Steve Ward. And guys, this has been a lot of fun. I mean, I don't think we've covered the things that we thought we were going to cover, but I'll tell you what, we just keep going down these paths and having a lot of fun with it. And I want to say thank you for sticking with us.
Well, as a testament to how good your show is, it's 1:35 here in Eastern Time, and I'm not at all tired.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. We don't like tired guests. They don't make, they don't make good guests.
Well, that's good.
But with that, I want to switch gears a little bit because we did mention fairy lore, and I've had you both on individually, and with each of you, that was one of the things we were going to kind of touch on, but we just ran out of time with other topics. So I want to set a little bit of time aside right now, right here, to kind of talk about fairy lore, because I will admit that I am one of the ones that I am very unfamiliar with a lot of this. In my view, I'm just beginning to realize that the fairies are not these happy little creatures that hop about the forest, but they are also sort of a potentially evil kind of little mischievous kind of character. And I was hoping you guys could kind of school us a little bit on the idea of the fairy.
Did you want to start, Zelia?
Sure thing. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, pop culture really has painted a very Tinkerbell-esque aspect for the fairies, but, you know, in a lot of, you know, the earlier lore, especially in Europe, you know, the classic, like, Celtic fairy lore and stuff like that, they are, I would say, you know, most often portrayed in a negative or at least a terrifying light. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of the very same things that we currently chalk up to extraterrestrials, such as abductions, you know, and sightings of lights in the sky and cases of missing time, those were all attributed to the fairies. And even in physical descriptions, you know, much like UFO occupants, fairies also were portrayed in a pretty vast array of different styles and looks. But a lot of the times you have these, this is something that's wildly interesting to me, is that oftentimes you'll have these shorter entities which bear kind of a striking resemblance to a lot of UFO occupants, especially in terms of dress. Apparently, you know, a lot, and this is really interesting to me too, a lot of the styles of dress for UFO occupants is also very close to the fairies. So you have these little tiny short entities, usually accompanied by one taller entity, which of course in fairy lore was considered the fairy queen. And in modern abduction lore, you see this pattern repeated, even though typically the shorter entities are the grays. And the taller entity is much more humanoid, and people kind of perceive it to be the person in charge. So a lot of these patterns, it's not even that they're similar, it's that they're pretty much identical, with maybe a little bit of retrofitting to fit our kind of more modern outlook on things.
Now, fairies, there are stories or tales of fairies beyond what maybe we think of initially, the idea of Europe or the British colonies or Britain, that kind of thing. There are stories of fairies pretty much worldwide, aren't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, every it seems like every culture has got some, and when you buy a volume on fairy lore, there's just all kinds of different names. In fact, they'll tell you that the fairies weren't necessarily small. Sometimes they could be as much as 7 foot tall and so forth. They could take on all kinds of forms. There are Alan Godfrey was a police officer in Todd Morden, and if you go back into the Welsh folklore by I can't think of the guy's name right now. It's not Elliot O'Donnell. It'll come to me. In the 1800s, he talks about how people were afraid to encounter a mist at night because sometimes the fairies would grab you. They would lift you in the air and then deposit you somewhere else and laugh as you tried to find your way home. Well, that sounds a little bit like a modern abduction experience. Just one example. I just read Alan Godfrey's book. He's a famous abduction case in England, 1980. And he was out looking for some displaced cows. That's another story, too. Displaced livestock, which occurs over and over again in these high strangeness areas. But he loses time. He sees some kind of a craft. And later on, he realizes he's missed about a half hour. And months later, he goes under regressive hypnosis. And this is under the broad folklore umbrella. He's talking about what he's seeing in the craft. And like Zelia just said, there's one tall entity, kind of humanoid, and then there's some shorter ones there. They're not exactly grays, but you definitely have this disparity where you've got the tall one that's in charge and the shorter ones. And then at one point, he stops and he says, "There's a bloody dog in here." There was a large black dog inside a, spacecraft? And it's sort of, and Jenny Randalls, who's reporting this story, points out that it's sort of shades of the black shuck, the black spectral dog that shows up on the moors and in old castle ruins in England and was the inspiration for the Hound of the Baskervilles. So you get all kinds of mixture between, what's a dog doing in a spacecraft, if that's what it is. And, of course, he ends up with the unscheduled medical exam. But and, again, this is coming out under hypnosis. Where does this come from? As Zelia pointed out, there's all kinds of parallels. There's the missing time, on the spacecraft. People that encountered the fairies had missing time. Only they would go to a cavern, the underground kingdom, or inside a mountain. And then there sometimes they would carry wands, just like some UFO entities would carry wands, and would induce paralysis in somebody. There was a case in Dyfed, Wales, a whole flap of UFO sightings that was a head-on collision between fairy folklore and we won't have time to go into it all, and modern-day UFO experiences. They even experienced people that, and in this case, there were 7-foot humanoids and small little short 3-foot beings. They were coming out of craft that looked like leprechauns. I mean, they had the slanted eyebrows and the curved nose, and so it's just. Sometimes there's no line of demarcation between both the fairy folklore and the modern-day UFO experience.
Zelia, I'm going to admit that I was very unfamiliar with the idea that there could be a person or human-sized fairy. I was always under the impression that they tended to be a little bit smaller. Are these larger ones sort of their own species or breed, or do they intermingle, or how does that work? And I hate to sound ignorant, but fairies are one of the things that I've just never gotten to get involved into.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, at the face of it, that's just a lot to do with our culture. That, yeah, it is, everyone really thinks of the cute little winged, entities that you see in Disney and stuff like that. And see, the strange thing is that, to me, again, it directly parallels modern-day accounts of UFO occupants, because you have just countless descriptions. So, yes, you do have these, taller humanoid entities that are mixed in with smaller ones sometimes. Then you also have simply, kind of like how we would consider them the Nordics or the Venusians of current UFO contact cases. These beautiful humanoids that appear to be human, maybe just a little bit off, but ultimately they're just like kind of the perfect human. Then you also have tons of different types. I mean, Fairy Lore is full of goblins and gnomes and different types of descriptions for these sort of things. So, and it's very similar with modern cases of UFO occupants, that you don't really have one set race or even a few set races of these different things. They just are kind of across the board. And to me, I know Ivan Sanderson tried to conquer that in Uninvited Visitors. And he came up with this idea sort of this never-ending alien parade that perhaps, if the universe is indeed limitless, there could be limitless forms of life, limitless types of humanoids that continuously visit Earth. So that's a theory for those who do subscribe to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which I believe at that time he definitely did. I think he changed a little bit in some of his later works. Personally, when you have so many variations, and then too you get into cases where multiple witnesses witnessing the same event see slightly different things, I have to question, their actual validity as to, is this what we're actually seeing? Especially too, because there's actually, I believe, and Steve probably knows exactly who it is, I believe it was Kirk's book on fairy lore. I think it was him, who he took psychics to these places where the fairies were supposed to live. And people had reported being taken into beautiful underground palaces and seeing these beautiful people, and everything was just perfect. And when these trained psychics were taken to these places, all they saw were damp caves, and they started describing entities that were creepy, hideous little entities that we would consider to be very much like the Greys. And this also has parallels in current abduction and contact reports, where people at first report seeing these, beautiful Venusians, and then all of a sudden, it's almost like the image starts to decay. Something happens, and they realize that instead of talking to something that's very humanoid and very pleasant, they've actually been with a Grey. So, you just have so many of these parallels. And to me, it causes me to question, can we trust what we're seeing? I do believe with all of this, there's a genuine phenomenon, but as to whether it is what we perceive, I have a lot of doubt for that.
Steve, Zelia mentioned the idea of these caves and underground palaces. And you know what? Right away, that brings up, was it the Richard Shaver mystery?
Oh, yes.
And that was a case where he was actually a science fiction writer. And he wrote for some of the, or was it one of the, it was one of the really popular kind of fun to read science fiction
amazing
magazines.
Stories.
Yeah, back in the day. And you can tell the story probably better than I can, but didn't he come out and state that there was an underground civilization?
He claimed that he had been held prisoner for 7 years by the evil Darrow. And I was born in Royal Oak, Michigan, which is was a little hospital there. Grew up in Ferndale. These are suburbs just north of Detroit, not too far from the infamous 8 Mile Road. You hear about so much. Although I was not close enough to have any street cred from that, but about 6 miles or so south of there is where Richard Shaver was working I guess it had to have been in the 30s, and it was a small, it was part of a car plant, and he would crank up his welding gun and start to hear voices. And it was only when he cranked it up, implying that perhaps this magnetic coil was picking up something. Well, that was his first encounter, apparently, with the Darrow. He was supposed to have been hearing these voices. And what happened was Ray Palmer, who was the editor of Amazing Stories, he's the one that took it over in the late 30s, early 40s and turned it around. He made it full of, adventures like space opera and Star Wars type stories. Some of the stories were not very good, and others were. Some good authors got their start there. But Shaver sent this letter about as an alphabet. It's like the root alphabet for all languages or whatever. And Harold Brown, who was sort of Ray Palmer's nemesis there at the magazine, saw the letter and said, "This guy's nuts," and threw it in the basket. Palmer retrieved it, and he started contacting Richard Shaver, who was living in Pennsylvania at the time. And then later on, Richard Shaver wrote him an essay, or whatever you want to call it, called A Warning to Future Man. And he was talking about these evil beings that lived beneath the earth, and they had this high technology. And they came from faraway stars, but because of they had to retreat underground because of the rays of the sun, which affected them. Darrow means detrimental robot, not literally a robot, but it means that they were sort of robotic. In other words, they were sort of mindless, and it's just amazing the response. Then he started what Palmer did. Ray Palmer did is take Shaver's supposed real stories and then punch them up a bit, make them kind of a bit science fiction as well. But Palmer seemed to really believe that something's going on. He even visited Shaver one time in Pennsylvania to see if there's any truth to any of this. And he said he heard all kinds of strange voices in the house. There were like 4 or 5 people talking, and they talked about how the evil Darrow had murdered some woman, and presumably it was 4 miles away and 4 miles under the earth. Well, that was kind of the beginning of the Shaver story, and it just set off a firestorm. People would talk about their own experiences, and Palmer said he was getting all kinds of letters from people that he didn't publish or whatever, that would talk about encountering beings in caves, hearing voices in the basement or whatever. I mean, I'm sure he was tapping into the lunatic fringe, but he seemed to really tap into something that was actually real. And there's there's so much to this, but you remember Long John Nebel had a radio show on WOR in New York, sort of the predecessor to Art Bell. Well, one night, and this is old-time technology, Long John Nebel had Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, who were living next door to each other by this time in Wisconsin, right near Palmer's publishing company. And this is via radio phone, so you would hear a beep every once in a while. But they're talking to Richard Shaver and Ray Palmer about the Shaver mystery, and Shaver's telling them things about how there's certain buildings in New York. If you get on the elevator and if you hit the down button twice, it'll take you miles down beneath the earth, and you could be captured by the Darrow. It's just wild stuff, and there's much, much more to it. But it did seem like Shaver was tapped into a source of information. In fact, it turns out that a lot of these voices were actually coming from him when he was sleeping. Ray Palmer's daughter saw him one time when he had fallen asleep on their couch, and she could hear these creepy voices coming from him. We've all heard recordings purportedly of people that have been possessed, and that all these voices are coming from them. Well, I think that's what it sounded like, although Shaver didn't seem to be possessed by any demons. I don't know what was going on, but just people really responded to this, and it still reverberates to this day.
Now, Shaver said that he was missing or abducted, held captive for 7 years. Is that correct?
Yes, but it turns out he spent, during that time, it looks like he spent time in some mental institutions. He was one in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and then a more extreme one in Ionia, Michigan. And Ray Palmer believes, Shaver said that these experiences were physical. Palmer believed that it was more psychic or whatever, the attack on Shaver. So he looked at the Darrow and so forth as real, but not physical beings per se, more on the from the astral plane. Shaver always claimed it was a physical experience and that somehow he escaped. But the literature on this is just tremendous. And there was a guy named Richard Taranto who has written a great book called The War Over Lemuria, where he does sort of a biography on both Palmer and Shaver and how they intertwine and so forth. And he also did a magazine for over decades. Sometimes he'd stop it and start it up again, called Shavertron, where he would discuss the shaver mystery and pull out clips of newspapers that would possibly tend to support the shaver material. But people really, really responded to this. But then, it brings in so many other things. Fred Chrisman, who was subpoenaed during the Kennedy assassination, the investigation, who is connected to the Maury Island mystery. Chrisman was sending BS letters to amazing stories about his encounters with the Darrow in a cave in Burma during World War II. I mean, this is a fascinating area for people to look into. It's just you couldn't summarize it in 24 hours. There's so much.
No, it's definitely a story that deserves to be looked at and learned about. And Zelia, I want to ask you, because Stephen mentioned that one of the statements made was that if you push an elevator button 2 times, you'll go down into their realm, so to speak. When these stories come out and then a claim like that is made, what does that do to both the claim and maybe the credibility of the person experiencing it? Because it seems like sometimes details or exaggerations are added that don't need to be added, and they kind of almost make the story, which is already difficult to necessarily believe, they make it even harder to believe.
Oh, yeah. When a claim like that is added, and you see this a lot in cases of people who believe they are in contact with other intelligences of any type, particularly ghosts or occult-type entities or UFO occupants. You see these claims that, okay, if you do this at this time, then this will happen. A big one is the prophecy game, where, oh, look, the world is going to end, so just hang around on this hilltop while, the saucer comes by to pick you up. And what really happens is most of the time, surprisingly, the world does not end. The elevator does not take you down into the land of the Darrow. And, it's just interesting, though, because more often than not, and this was kind of discussed quite a bit in Messengers of Deception, it's all about the belief structure around this stuff, and a lot of the times, these people, they believe so strongly in their contact, which I do think in many of these cases is legitimate, that people are actually involved in something that is unexplained. However, when they actually take the step, to wait on that hilltop or to press that elevator button, simply nothing happens. So, but it's very interesting. And I do think too, then you also have things kind of taking a life of their own, where that's just added onto the story. And then, it becomes kind of that action, and that becomes, the thing that people focus on, going to these places and trying to see these things. And that garners, a whole reputation of its own. I mean, you see this too with the propensity of a lot of paranormal hotspots to become cursed or whatever with horrible tragedies, and then that kind of feeds back into the idea of it being a strange location.
I can understand that. It's just, it's interesting to, when you look at some of the stories and some of the details, like you guys have mentioned on a couple of times now, the idea of Venusians. Well, back then, we were taught that Venus was essentially our twin planet. We know now that our twin is horribly disfigured and ugly because we could never survive there. But back in that time period, it was our twin planet. And I wonder if that is somebody just relating their experience to a planet that they have been taught exists a certain way and they believe it, or is it the beings using the idea that we believe that planet is that way, so to introduce themselves, they just say they're from Venus?
Yeah, I think entities claiming where they're from is a whole study in and of itself. And I do think that, they use whatever model works at that time. And because you see a lot of contact with Venusians, when we did still, like you were saying, believe that it was habitable by, what we would consider to be humanoid life. And now I do feel like it's outsourced a little bit.
Stephen, Zelia, we've got to hop out for yet another break because that went by way too fast. So I'm going to get you guys to hold on, and we will be right back on Spaced Out Sunday.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I'm bringing you the Woo every Monday through Friday on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going all out to bring you the strangest, oddest stories and subjects I could find for your entertainment. Why? Because when we hit peak Woo, I know I've done my job. So come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com, 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, and together, my friends, we own the night.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
If you like it hot, real hot, then heat up your meals with Bumblefoot hot sauce.
Get your Bumblefoot hot sauce today. The sauce, Bumblelicious, and the 4 million Scoville unit Bumble. We're going in hot, real hot, coming out even hotter.
Keep the milk nearby and tantalize your taste buds tonight.
Bumblefoot hot sauce, available now at kajans.com.
Hello, space travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. And follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at MightyMooseBeard.com today.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother is Watching.
Hi, This is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer, and thanks for spending your Sunday with. See, I couldn't help. I had to do it. Now I'm going to be in so much trouble tomorrow. There's going to be a staff meeting. Things are going to happen. It's going to be bad. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates, KDNF, AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas, KDUN, AM 1030 in Reedsport, Oregon, KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California, WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, and UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. For our digital listeners, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping in the SOR Vault, reading up on the SOR Newswire. Captain Shirk does a great job of finding us some weird and wacky news, even a little bit of Florida Man here and there, because we like to know what he's up to lately. Before the break, we were talking with Zelia Edgar and Steve Ward, and we were talking about the Richard Shaver mystery. And Steve, you wanted to kind of follow up with a point on that?
Well, it wasn't so much Shaver. Zelia was just talking about the messages the entities give the contactee. By the way, I recommend that any messages coming from these aliens are suspect, because they'll tell you anything. But especially, Zelia was talking about the origins, where they say they're from. And it used to be when we believed that there could be life in other parts of the solar system, you'd hear Venus, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn even, and so forth. But then as time went on, the places got further away, sometimes other galaxies and so forth. But also, another thing, there's always adjustments. There's some of the contactees claim that they're the alien or the space brother or whatever comes from Venus still, but either it's from inside the planet where it's not subject to the harsh surface conditions, or a lot of times you'll hear that they're on another vibration, sort of in another dimension. They're from Venus, but they exist, on this different vibration where they're not, again, subject to the harsh conditions. So you can always make an adjustment to accommodate the origin of the Space Brothers.
If a being is interdimensional and living on another plane, does it necessarily even have to live on a planet? Wouldn't it potentially be just living within another plane that we don't have any understanding of?
Now, see, Everett, you've got next time you contact one of the Space Brothers, you're going to have to challenge them on that and say, "What's the deal? Why do you need a planet?" That's true. I mean, again, it depends on what they mean by living on another. I guess we could be living on the Earth, but living in another dimension or another vibration level, but still have our feet planted firmly on this ball of dirt, I guess. I mean, all speculation, of course.
Well, Zelia, if everything is vibrating, can we have our feet planted firmly anywhere?
That's a good question. And that is the point sometimes with the paranormal where I get is like, yeah, how far are we really going to take this? Because then, too, you start bringing in quantum physics and looking at, how does thought influence matter, wave particles, stuff like that. And suddenly things became even infinitely stranger than we started out with just talking about Bigfoot and ghosts,
We're awful close to hitting that time traveler topic.
Yeah, honestly. And yeah, that comes across a lot, especially in regards to UFO contactees, what they believe they're contacting in the Men in Black. I see that all the time.
Steve, you mentioned channeling our space brothers a little bit. And that's one of those topics that when people start to talk like that or bring that idea out, a lot of the researchers and a lot of the people who kind of follow the paranormal used to sort of back away and maybe say, well, that's where we begin to draw the line. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show, how it seems like so many things are becoming interconnected. Is the view of channeling or communicating with aliens via sort of thought changing? Is it becoming more commonplace? How do people look at it now?
I think it's it may be more accepted. It's not necessarily even the Space Brothers. There's all kinds of they'll believe that highly evolved beings that have moved on from this plane are doing the channeling sometimes, helping to guide us. But if you go back to George Van Tassel, George Van Tassel lived under Giant Rock in California. They actually had rooms carved underneath this giant rock. You should check out the pictures on the internet. But he would hold these great contactee conventions out there. He actually had built a landing strip so people could land there. But he would, in his little enclave there, would channel the Space Brothers. And you can find old recordings of this. And then, let's see, George Hunt Williamson. He's one of the guys that one of the witnesses that witnessed the famous George Adamski is supposed to have contacted Orthon in the desert in 1951, a Venusian that landed in his Venusian scout ship. Well, later on, George Hunt Williamson, not to be confused with George Van Tassel or George Adamski, a lot of Georges, he claimed that they were getting messages from over ham radio. And there's a book called The Saucers Speak where he has these communications. A lot of the entities are the same. The same names keep showing up, Ashtar and so forth. It's very interesting because they started out, George Hunt Williamson, doing things like the Ouija board and automatic writing and channeling to get their messages. And then James Mosley, who was the editor of Saucer News, for years. He left us a few years ago. He was a bit of a trickster. He created a few hoaxes in his time, which still reverberate to this day. But he interviewed Lyman Streeter, who was supposed to be the ham radio operator that received a lot of these messages. And he found out that it was probably more of a literary device, and they probably were still just doing the channeling kind of a thing. But it is interesting that there's a lot of sources where people are channeling supposedly these beings that don't know each other or are separated by generation. But you get the same names. You get some of the same themes, too. For example, the bad aliens come from the Orion group, the Orion Nebula. The good guys come from the Pleiades. There's another theme that comes up that the asteroid belt used to be a planet named Meldek that either had a collision or destroyed itself or something. So it's very interesting. You're getting these themes from very different groups of people that don't know each other or didn't know each other. Almost like Keel's catchphrase, that great phonograph in the sky is still cranking out the same kind of belief system over and over again. And different people are picking up on it, but not necessarily making the contact that somebody else was there first.
That is interesting as heck. Zelia, I want to ask you, is it unfair to label maybe these entities as space brothers if we're talking interdimensional? Is it possible that we're all just, maybe humans just need to raise their vibration to enter another plane, and we're missing out on what the world or the galaxy is providing or showing us, or, well, in this case, not showing us. But is it unfair or odd to label these interdimensional beings space brothers when in fact we could be all living in the same space?
Yes, I would say that it is a huge misconception. I think that is kind of like sort of the kiss of death for the whole UFO contact in particular phenomenon, is when we started strictly looking at it in terms of the extraterrestrial biological entity hypothesis. Just because a lot of this, I mean, it involves things that have been, not only they've been with humanity, I feel like, since, the very beginning, at least since recorded history, these very similar occurrences. But they are also very much a part of, our culture and our belief systems. And to me, to label that as extraterrestrial, I think, is one of the biggest misconceptions we really could have done with this phenomenon. Simply because then, now, we are so focused on especially looking for planets that could support life as we understand it, when it is really my conviction with a lot of these that, they're definitely not from outer space, or they're definitely not physically from outer space. And I think that too, possibly, the interesting thing with this is there's a lot of symbolism and imagery in these cases of contact. And it could be too that in using the notion of coming from outer space, it's kind of just meant to imply that they're coming from somewhere else. And you see this too in the names. I know Keel mentioned that a lot of UFO occupants would call themselves Xeno. And of course, the people who would record that spelled it as Zeno. Well, that actually, is more like Xeno, Xeno, which of course means stranger or, other. And you see this name game a lot. Steve and I actually just were chatting about how Indrid Cold apparently came from the planet Lanulus in the galaxy of Ganymede. Right. And Ganymede, of course, is... it's not, we've never called it, at least to that point, we've never called a galaxy Ganymede. But what it is it's the myth of Ganymede, who actually was abducted by the gods in Greek mythology. So there's just symbolism rife through this. And I have to wonder if the notion of, outer space, we come from out there, is kind of meant more to imply this otherness or this separateness.
And can I interrupt briefly about Indrid Cold? Supposedly met Woodrow Derenberger at the crossroads. And John Keel checked out an old book called The View Over Atlantis by John Mitchell, I think, or Mitchell anyway. And you find the old ley lines and so forth, the old crossroads, they would have common names like red, white, coal, and cold. So Indrid Cold met Woodrow Derenberger at the crossroads, reflecting the old names, one of the old names of those old kinds of crossroads. Very interesting. More symbolism, I guess. Even if I'm not sure if Indrid was correct or was real or not. I have a question for Zelia. When we talk about people contacting these entities, whatever they are, what I wonder if a lot of this is simply coming out of the collective unconscious, like the Philip experiment. Philip wasn't real, but he acted as if he was real, and people were really getting messages over the Ouija board from him, from it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to do with the collective unconscious in regards to this phenomenon, especially how it's perceived. And again, too, it's like, it gets just so complex when it comes to the symbolism and the name game and the synchronicities with these different places. The Philip experiment, that was really interesting because it did show, too, there's strong evidence then that people were able to manifest this other intelligence strictly out of nothing, which brings up another compelling case for, is this phenomena something that is of its own accord, something separate, Or is it actually some manifestation from our collective unconscious? I don't, just pretending to be, from out there. I don't really know.
Well, I have another. There was a gentleman named Dr. Patrick Flanagan. He's the first one to write a book on pyramid power. The idea that if you align a pyramid with true north, you can preserve sharpened razor blades and preserve meat and so forth. Well, he was on Everett. Do you remember the Tom Snyder Tomorrow Show way back?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, he had him on one time in about 73 or 74. He had spent the night, one of the first guys to spend the night in a pyramid. And sometime later, he had this spontaneous experience, which was essentially channeling. Then they didn't call it channeling then, or at least on that show. And so he demonstrates for Tom Snyder what's going on. And he closes his eyes, does the deep breathing, and all of a sudden he's speaking in this deep voice. And he says, "Hello, Tom. My name is Dr." And I can't remember the name he gave. I've Googled it. It doesn't correspond to anything. But then he says, "I am a higher level of Patrick's consciousness." That's the only time I've ever heard a channeled entity, in quotes, identify himself as the higher level of consciousness of the individual he's coming through. So I thought that was interesting, that perhaps all or most of these channeled entities, and there are many of them, many books, Seth and Ra and so forth, I wonder if they're simply another aspect of the collective unconsciousness or an individual's consciousness.
Well, that's a little frightening. And I say that because we sit here and we kind of, or at least I feel myself as I'm a whole. I'm a person and I exist. But when you bring something like that in, that concept all of a sudden means I'm just a tiny part of maybe an entirely, well, not separate, but a different being. That I am just maybe one aspect of that being's thoughts and ideas.
I tend to think more that you're the guy, and this other aspect of your consciousness would still be you. You would still have control. There's a lot of these huge volumes of books that have been channeled. One was called OASP. A guy named a dentist, I think he was, John Battle Newborough, back in the 1800s, channeled this immense volume on a typewriter, supposedly channeled by a highly evolved spirit beings. Well, I'm probably going to anger some people, but I can't make heads or tails of OASP. On the other hand, there's another channeled volume called A Course in Miracles, which is more sort of new thought, new age. It's very, very similar to the teachings around the turn of the last century, around the same time as Theosophy and the Unity School of Christianity and so forth are coming up. But that channeled book seems to be something more along the lines of, sort of positive thinking, self-help, something that you can relate to. So it's in other words, I guess I kind of see this consciousness, whatever it is, but having different strata or different levels like our own consciousness does. And perhaps some of these volumes or these beings or whatever however they represent themselves are coming from higher or lower levels of that spectrum. And we have to by their fruits shall ye know them. We have to really be careful about what is claimed to be coming through various channels, if that makes any sense.
That makes complete sense. Zelia, we've got about 5 minutes left before we have to go to the break, and I'm going to start this with you. What do you think, as we're talking about the idea of higher consciousness and higher levels, what do you think of the idea of we're all living in the Matrix? And I hate to even bring that up because so many people seem to be quoting the Matrix series almost as a documentary now. But what do you think of that concept?
It's a very interesting one. It's one I've actually thought about for quite some time because, like I said, I have a passing interest in the ideas kind of quantum physics and how much can we really affect, what effect does perception and observation have on at a small level, yes, particles and subatomic particles, but on a larger level, what effect does that have on reality as we understand it? And that ties into, as well, to synchronicity, which, a lot of people probably think it's all hoodoo, but, when you experience something that, as I have and a lot of people I know, when you experience something that just seems like it was somehow, pre-written or something, it's a very eerie feeling. And yeah, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it's coincidence. But, to quote Mulder, if coincidences are coincidences, why do they feel so contrived? I don't think it is, as clear cut as the notion of the Matrix that, yes, we are in some sort of digital world or anything like that. I do think that reality as we perceive it is not all there is. And I think that there is an infinitely stranger universe which underlies it, and one that's tied up a lot closer to whatever we are, and again, for some reason, I've always been very okay with these very strange concepts and trying to figure them out. And so ultimately my worldview is just that we know very little about ourselves and, our world, I guess, to answer your question.
Steve, what do you think about the idea of people using the Matrix series as a documentary and us living in the quote-unquote Matrix?
Maybe a variation on that. We do seem to, in this existence, be seeing things through a glass darkly, so to speak. I mean, we have this concept about the source, the universe, the deity, or whatever, and this perfection, and that ultimately we are an expression of that perfection. But there's some kind of a disconnect there. We can't quite. We seem to be separate from that. Like there's I don't know, something, maybe something like a matrix, something in between that ultimate truth, that perfection, and what we are experiencing now. And, all the great traditions, the religious, the spiritual traditions, the self-actualization traditions talk about you kind of throwing off that those chains and so forth and raising your consciousness to a higher level. So it's not quite, I don't think it's quite the way that they talk about the Matrix, but we do seem to be, we don't seem to be able, I don't think, to perceive all the time ultimate reality. I think people get, some of the sages and seers and people that have, certain moments, they get glimpses of that, but it's something that we all seem to want to achieve.
Okay, I understand that. But before we have to go to break, I just wanted to ask you, Steve, didn't they recreate or reattempt the Philip experiment maybe 10 years ago or so, and they got very similar results?
I'm not aware of it, but I would be shocked if they didn't get similar results, because that seems to be connected to human consciousness. It brings in the idea of the tulpa as well, the Tibetan thought form, that if you focus long enough on a particular item, Alexandria David Neal traveled Tibet, and she wrote Magic and Mystery in Tibet, and supposedly she learned how to create a tulpa. And that's interesting too, because it went through certain stages. I don't know. I think we're running out of time now, but that represents another pattern that shows up in the paranormal.
Yes, Steve, Zelia, we have to step out for a break. And there's one topic when we come back, because we only have one segment left, half hour, and we're done with the show. When we come back, I want to talk to you guys about something that, Steve, you actually kind of brought to my attention, and that's the idea of biological UFOs. So if we could talk about that, I would really enjoy it. And we will be right back on Spaced Out Sunday.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblelicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
Are you looking for great advertising value for your company? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. We have a multitude of places to get your name out there, including commercial ads during the show, special promotions, and banners on our website. Our audience is proven to support the companies that support our show. We can make your budget work for you. So for more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
You wanted new SOR gear, and now you can have it. The SOR Vault is fully stocked with t-shirts, hats, hoodies, mugs, and everything in between with great logos for you to choose from. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com, click on the SOR Vault, and go shopping. Pricing is quite affordable, and you can look good representing your favorite show. So go to our website and pick up your new SOR wear at the SOR Vault today.
Move over, brother, and let me own Saturday night.
This is Rich Giordano, and I'm inviting you to tune on in to Spaced Out Saturdays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to bust open the lids on everything paranormal. Why? Because we want answers, and I'm the guy who's going to deliver those answers to you. Join the chat rooms, and we'll see you this Saturday. Just be there. No, really.
Are you addicted to the woo? Good. Me too. This is Dave Scott, and you can woo it up with me every Monday through Friday, starting at 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, for 3 hours of great entertainment in the subjects you love. UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, intuition. Yes, we hit it all 5 days a week. Look for us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, my friends, we own the night.
At spacedoutradio.com, we are keeping you up to date on all the news with the SOR Newswire. Captain Shirk leads the team that is bringing you the news of the day and exclusive stories on everything paranormal and supernatural. It's free to read, it's updated daily, and it's right there for you. The SOR Newswire is a one-stop shop for the news of the day. Check it out at spacedoutradio.com today.
Hello everyone, this is Ryan Stacy from the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightlines Report. Together, we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences you've had. We're looking for answers just like you. So fill out a Sightlines Report on the Spaced Out Radio website and let's figure out what's going on together.
Hey Spaced Out Radio fans, it's John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. Our goal is to make the life of veterans, first responders, and those with rare medical conditions 10% happier. We do this by donating one grant item, ranging from dance to therapy programs to prosthetic limbs, to those who need it most. To contribute to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and become a donor today.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
From the heartlands of Canada to beards around the world, we know how to take care of you. Fill your follicles with the Mighty Moose Beard Oil. All our oils and balms are handmade and 100% natural ingredients because we care about your beard. And hey, use the promo code SOR2019 and get your Mighty Moose Beard Oil today. You can check us out on our website, mightymoosebeard.com.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. And while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer. And Sunday is almost over. Don't forget, if you've missed any part of the show, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping in the SOR Vault, and for $5 a month, you can join the Space Travelers Club and get some exclusive content, throw your opinion in on our forums, join the ongoing chat. There's always something fun going on in there. Now, we're just about done with the show, and it's gone way too fast. So for the final time, I'm going to reintroduce Zelia Edgar and Steve Ward, and we have been talking the weird beyond the weird. And before we have to get out of here, guys, I want to talk to you about or have you guys educate me on the idea of biological UFOs. Because, Steve, this is something that you kind of brought to my attention, and it fascinates me. Can you explain it a little bit?
Well, it's quite a wide topic, but there are some people believe. Now, I interviewed a guy named Nick Hayes, who followed in the work of a gentleman named Trevor James Constable. He used to write books under Trevor James because he had a real business in California, and he even did some acting. He was in one of the old Richard Burton war movies. And he even spoke at the Giant Rock conventions in California. But he wasn't liked very much because he was talking about the dark side of some of these entities. He would go out in the Mojave Desert with a camera. This is back in the late 50s, loaded with infrared film, and take photographs of, and the images were printed in this book that I found years ago in the 60s called They Live in the Sky. And I was fascinated by this book, looking at the plates of something that looks like an amoeba in the sky and all kinds of strange shapes and everything. And he tells the story behind it. It gets really weird because he was channeling, he was a friend of George Van Tassel, that we mentioned before. George Van Tassel taught him how to channel. And so he was channeling an intergalactic being named Ashtar. Now, just about everybody has channeled Ashtar, it sounds like. Even a lady I know, her grandmother used to channel Ashtar. And then now later on, he gave up the channeling because he started to believe that they were actually a negative source or negative entities. But I thought, I just didn't. I was fascinated by this book, but I didn't know what to think of him. Was he crazy? I mean, did he fake these photographs? And then years later, I heard him interviewed on a radio show about 2003 or 4, and very lucid, very believable gentleman. He was a merchant marine. He was a World War II aviation historian. And I've even seen – and then later on, he got into weather engineering via Wilhelm Reich. So many people branch off from this guy. So it sounded very convincing that perhaps he was really – and then he would have he had a means – that he learned from a gentleman named Ernest Lear, who wrote Man or Matter. It was a means of focusing his attention so that he could bring these sky creatures in because they're invisible. So then he would supposedly meditate, bring these creatures in, and then they would take photographs of the landscape and get these strange looking images. Now, Nick Hayes has also gotten some of these, although you have to be very careful with digital images because you can get some strange artifacts that are not anything to do with sky critters. But there's many, many other John Keel encountered during the Mothman sightings. He went down to the Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds. He saw these purple lights in the sky, and they acted very much like like living beings. He doesn't describe it in the book, but in one of his lectures, he talks about how they came down and they surrounded him, and they're just like blobs of light. And I know that Zelia has done a lot of research on this too. I think doesn't Ivan Sanderson talk about a something, does he call it a globster or something like that? Something that came down. It was sort of they tell the story of a blob of something that comes down and hits the ground, and it was almost like it was a real creature that had sort of solidified and then died on the ground. Oh, there's one other before I turn it over to Zelia. In Ray Palmer also published Flying Saucer magazine, and somebody wrote a letter to him saying that they were flying over Utah. They landed on one of these mesas. I forget the name of the plane that he had. This is a long time ago. And they saw something come down, another kind of these blob things. And it was like it was attacked by some other creature. But it was partially visible, according to this letter back from the 50s. And it was allegedly attacked by this other creature, and the one carried it off, and he describes it in some detail in this letter. So there may be something to this, that some of these and then there's Jose Escamilla that believes that he's captured something he calls rods, these elongated things that he calls them skyfish also. So there's I know Zelia's got another part to this, but it's very intriguing. And I was in Trevor James Constable, like I said, he's connected to Wilhelm Reich. He's connected to George Adamski. He's connected to Ruth Drown, that was the first, the pioneer of radionics. It's just fascinating.
Zelia, any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, Ivan Sanderson is how I really became introduced to the idea of biological UFOs. And this is also something, too, that actually I've had personal experiences with on several occasions. The most notable it was some years ago, and I was watching a lunar eclipse with my sisters, and it was like a summer night, I think. And, just off, like, on the horizon, there were these, and it's very bizarre to describe, but the best way I can describe it is they looked like, very deep sea, the bioluminescent fish. And I know this probably sounds really weird, but, you could just see these like faint, slightly luminescent outlines kind of just darting around off, in the sky. And so that really intrigued me because, of course, too, at that time, I was still kind of very interested in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Spacecraft was like kind of the mode of thought I had on UFOs. And so then I found out about Ivan Sanderson's work. And especially in Uninvited Visitors, he really makes a case that a lot of these sightings might be some, like, of craft or perceived craft, might be some sort of massive life form. And again, something that might be, almost like a giant amoeba or like some sort of very simple, like almost jellyfish type organism. And I know that's kind of one of the go-to is the sky jellies or the flying jellyfish. That's how a lot of people describe them. And, the interesting thing, because, of course, Sanderson came from the aspect, he was a biologist. And so he walks you through kind of how this might be the case. And one of the most interesting concepts to me is the idea of these extremophile life forms that do subsist only on chemical compounds and stuff like that. So if you really look at it that way in some of these cases, because a jellyfish, very simple life form, it's been around, it's one of the oldest life forms we have. It's only about 5%, the actual body. The 95% that we see is just filled with water. So if you could take something like that and make it of a completely, even less dense material or, makeup, suddenly it becomes a lot more feasible that these things could perhaps exist in the upper atmosphere, because there's a lot of sightings of them. And then, too, you bring in trace evidence such as angel hair or star jelly. And some of it, while it has been explained, for star jelly in particular, different types of fungus and things like that, a lot of it remains unidentifiable and very strange. It evaporates on contact with anything. And, the stuff that has been studied appears to be organic, but they can't make out the DNA. Suddenly there is honestly quite a bit of evidence that at least some sightings of things in the sky may be organic in nature.
And Constable has one of his classic photographs, if it's real, looks like an amoeba in the sky.
Yep.
It's just, and he also has some moving film of these things moving around as well. It sounds like, I say, when I first read the book, I thought, oh, then later on he wrote a book called The Cosmic Pulse of Life, where he expands on a lot of these ideas. He has left the channeling behind. There's a paragraph in there somewhere that implies that he had, been a little bit older and wiser and had left some of that behind. But yeah, it's really fascinating. And I was trying to remember the globster that there's a classic case. It's reported in some of old Frank Edwards books with this purple blob or whatever it is, a sort of like a. Does that ring any bells? Okay.
It fell over. Was it in Pennsylvania somewhere? And I think some police officers saw it. Right? Is that the one?
That sounds right. But my recollection is very hazy.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think that was Pennsylvania. That was in the 50s or 60s. And yeah, this huge, just purple glob fell over a street. And again, too, I believe it evaporated.
Yes, it evaporated.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those classic cases that shows up now and then. Very rare. I mean, whatever it was, it certainly was not a nuts and bolts craft.
No, not.
Wasn't there a case of something like that, or wasn't something like that associated with the Shag Harbor case at some point? I believe that there was some sort of angel hair or some sort of debris, fibrous debris falling from the sky. And I could be wrong with that, but I
could be. It seems like, Zelia, that I remember back when I first discovered UFOs and I was hitting the public library, you'd hear a lot of cases of angel hair, but it seems like those – in fact, the UFO phenomena has changed a bit over time. There are fewer disk craft. There are more lights or blobs of lights and more triangles, giant triangles. So there has been kind of an evolution, just in the same way there's been an evolution with entities. Before the Greys showed up, we used to have quite a variety of humanoids. And then, with the advent of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think, and Communion by Whitley Strieber, that's around the time when the Greys seem to start showing up in mass. Again, perhaps implying that these things are somewhat reflective in nature.
I wanted to ask quickly, the idea of a biological UFO, where does that fit then in the scale, or where does that type of being or entity fit on sort of the scale of higher consciousness, I guess I would have to phrase it as? Because here we are, and then we have these beings that seem to need to use some form of craft to show up or appear on our planet. And then you have these appearingly biological beings that can just appear out of a portal, almost much like Bigfoot may hop in and out of a portal and appear and disappear. So I wonder, where is there are we all at different levels, or how does that work? Are we all just sort of trying to work our way up the consciousness scale?
I think some people think that they're just more like animals in the sky. Although, if you go back to Meade Lane, who was one of the pioneers in looking at paraphysical craft, and this includes Trevor James Constable, some of them believe that the Etherians were actually real entities driving their ether ships, which were which were pretty much invisible most of the time. So some of these craft were driven by intelligent entities, but the craft are very very hard for somebody on this three-dimensional level to see. But I don't know. I suppose that these sky critters or whatever, I mean, if they really exist, I suppose there could be many levels of intelligence there.
Well, I just
Yes.
wonder. Go ahead, Zelia.
I do see that there is there's a few different ways of thinking about it, and to me, on the face of it, it appears that these really, the large scale ones that you see in the upper atmosphere, I feel like tend to behave very much like, yes, an amoeba or a jellyfish, a very simple, not entirely what we would consider to be intelligent in any way that we understand it, organism. However, when it comes to like the purple blobs, which, I heard that Keel lecture, I think is one that you sent me, because he actually referred to these lights as his purple friends. They would actually up close to him when he was walking through this one area, which then later on it turns out he found out that dogs tended to disappear in that very same stretch of land. So he was pretty lucky, I guess. And I feel like those particular lights tend to be, or like globular light forms, I guess I can't really call them lights, tend to appear to be more intelligent how we would consider intelligence to be, if that makes sense, of like, a further advanced life form. Even though, again, they look very similar, I would say.
Has anybody ever gotten to interact or received a message from these sort of flying amoeba type creatures?
Not that I'm aware of. Constable, his communications were supposedly from, space beings or whatever. But that's a good question. I don't recall anything in the literature. Maybe Zelia does of any kind of direct contact.
I feel like sometimes contact is made by other intelligences when these things are around, but I don't think it's ever tied directly to the luminous objects, except, of course, the orb phenomena, which I do see as different from this, and the globular lights, kind of like what Keel described. I feel like those are sometimes associated with messages, but not like the strictly, the biological luminescent type entities that we're considering that are up in the upper atmosphere or anything like that.
But you just mentioned the orb phenomenon, and we're not talking ghost hunting dust orbs. We're talking sort of beings or lights that appear to have some sort of intelligence behind them. And those are becoming more and more commonplace in terms of sightings, aren't they?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, go ahead.
Does that maybe relate to the idea of the collective consciousness and sort of the, I hate to phrase it this way, but the global enlightenment type environment that we're living in, especially within the UFO community?
Perhaps. I know that Ted Phillips, who was a colleague of Dr. Hynek, and he has investigated thousands of trace landing cases where a UFO lands, leaves burn marks, or has an effect on an individual. He discovered an area he called Marley Woods in southern Missouri. And he said that he's been watching it for about 15 years, and he said that there's less metallic discs craft. I mean, he chronicled many of those landings, and but now it's more like this light orb phenomenon. And sometimes they'll separate and join together. He didn't see much of anything in the way of a classic UFO in this area, but they saw strange creatures there. People had missing time and so forth, but they have this weird orb phenomena. So I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't know the why. It's just what I'm saying is why the change.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the hope. See, the interesting thing for me is, like, especially in the UFO field, everybody wants disclosure from the government that, with what they know and everything like that. My thing is, I have the wonder that perhaps, maybe they don't know much more about the phenomena in general than your average person or researcher. And so that being said, my hope, more than even for disclosure, is that maybe, the sightings of more of these orbs, especially in relation to other types of paranormal phenomena, because people do see orbs in conjunction not only with UFOs or as a standalone thing, but also, with ghosts and not the dust motes and with cryptids. So, of course, the hope there is that maybe it is kind of peeling back the curtain, so to speak, and really seeing kind of the phenomenon for what actually underlies it. Because I know, I think Steve mentioned this earlier in the program, Keel, at one point really wondered if the only real thing to most of this phenomenon was this kind of light phenomena, these anomalous lights and things like that. So of course that's the hope, is that kind of collectively we are trying to really see it for what it is as opposed to what we've perceived it to be. But I don't really know.
And with that, I hate to do this, but we're just about out of time. We're done.
Bummer.
We haven't even hit all of the topics I had hoped to hit, but the time is gone. And I just want to take a minute and get you guys to tell everybody where you guys can be found. Zelia, where can people find your work?
If you go to my website, justanothertinfoilhat.com, I have links to my YouTube channel, my podcast on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, anything else I'm doing at the time, and any upcoming events, which include speaking at the Butler Paranormal Conference, which I'm very excited about, and the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which I'm also very excited about.
And I would recommend people take a look at your work, because it is fantastic. And you are such a young rising star on the paranormal field, and it's great to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you're from the Midwest, because we don't have a lot of great researchers coming out of the Midwest anymore. But Steve, where can people find your work?
You can find me on Facebook. My show is on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, The High Strangeness Factor, every other week. You can hear me every week on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a correspondent. I will be speaking at the Mothman Festival in September. I'll be attending the Pine Bush event in June. I don't believe I'll be speaking there. I'll be leading a group for the Para Expedition people in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in June as well. And I think, and I'll be speaking at Van Meter later in September. And I think that's about it.
I'm going to have to try and make it over to Van Meter. That looks like a really interesting. It's not quite fair to call it a festival, is it? It's more than a festival, because there's some serious research and discussion going on there, isn't there?
Yes, it's sort of like the early days of the Mothman Festival. It's not huge. It's not thousands of people. But this year, we've got David Weatherly, who wrote the Black-Eyed Children book, Ken Gerhard, who's a Bigfoot encrypted researcher. So last year we had Linda Godfrey. So it's Zelia. It is such a good place. I mean, I met so many really, really interesting people there. It's just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, it's an awesome time, like really.
Well, guys, with that, I have to wrap this up and get out of here, because they're going to kick me out real soon. So if I can get you guys to hold on for 1 second, I'm going to get this done, and we'll talk a little bit after the show. We've got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. A special thank you to everyone listening in at home, in your cars, at work, in our chat rooms, and wherever you may be. Remember, this show is copywritten by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thanks for sharing your Sunday with us, because together, my friends, we own the night.